The president has authorized the release of a transcript
Yes.
of the conversation. It may or may not have the quid pro quo that many are looking for. So how does that factor into what just happened now?
Well, the president, and again, Lester, he's calling it a transcript. We don't know what exactly this release is going to consist of tomorrow. It could be notes taken from officials in the room. It may not be exact verbiage of what exactly went down. But the fact that the White House is releasing it and that the president wants it released is an indication that there may not be the smoking gun that some Democrats want to see. Stepping back, this moment, this afternoon, is a defining moment, one of several in the Trump presidency so far. If the first half of his tenure was defined by the special counsel investigation, the second half will likely be defined by this impeachment inquiry. So how is the president's world, how are her folks inside that orbit reacting? Based on my reporting, it's a mix of trepidation about this and defiance, that sort of traditional attitude that we sometimes see from President Trump.
Let me get you to pause right there because I'm told the president has just tweeted. I haven't seen it, but there it is. Such an important day at the United Nations, so much work and so much success, and the Democrats purposely had to ruin and demean it with more breaking news, witch hunt garbage, so bad for our country. A tweet that just came from the president.
Already you're seeing the president brand this, just like he branded the special counsel investigation as a witch hunt, except this time it's not Robert Mueller behind it. In his view, it's Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats. Although I'm told by sources familiar with the president's thinking that he doesn't want necessarily impeachment, there is a sense this could be politically helpful for him and that it could encourage his base to turn out, the president's core supporters, and fire them up.
That's the Pelosi gamble here.
That's the gamble, and it is a bit of a political risk. When you look at some of the polling numbers on this, granted, prior to this whistleblower complaint emerging, most Americans from recent polling don't support moving forward with these impeachment proceedings. And I think that's why you saw Speaker Pelosi draw such a through line to the Constitution. How many times did she talk about it in that brief statement there, trying to make the argument, and I've heard this from other Democrats, this goes above politics in their view. This is about upholding the oath of office that they took as members of Congress when they entered the halls of the Capitol.
But let's not forget, a lot of Democrats were also on the fence about this. The tipping point,
That's
apparently,
right.
That phone call and the implications.
She had almost no choice here at this point, because even just in the last 24 hours, Lester, you have seen some roughly 24 Democrats come out now and change their position on impeachment. The pressure had been building slowly, and then it built all at once, given this phone call and the reports of what the president discussed with the leader of Ukraine. By the way, the president wants to talk about his successes and what he's done here, as he put it, at the United Nations General Assembly. You know who he's meeting with one-on-one tomorrow is the president of Ukraine.
And let's talk about, okay, you got the transcript. Nancy Pelosi also saying we want to hear the story of the whistleblower. That's a potentially long legal battle ahead of us as well.
Absolutely. And a legal battle that could extend for months, if not longer. It's going to come to a head, at least at the start of it, later this week, when you have the acting director of national intelligence, member of the Trump administration, who has been blocking this complaint from being turned over, appearing in front of these congressional committees in an open session at one point, both the House and the Senate side. When you talk about the Senate piece of it, Lester, and you heard this question being shouted to Speaker Pelosi as she walked out of the room, and if our viewers couldn't hear it, it related to what the Senate is going to do at this point, because the House could move eventually, potentially vote to impeach President Trump. The Senate is majority Republican. And right now, when I talk to sources in and around Trump world, they point to the fact that so far the GOP is mostly a united front here. You have seen very little daylight between the president and his allies on Capitol Hill, and that could be advantageous for the president.
There was some thought that this would focus solely on this Ukraine conversation and Joe Biden, but she talks about the committees continuing their work. Does that suggest that this will be based on everything that they have laid out?
Because it's not just the Ukraine sort of story that has emerged in these last few days, and it's also not just the special counsel report and what our colleague Jeff Bennett was talking about as it relates to information that members of the House wanted on that. It's the president's finances. It's the president's business. It's conflicts of interest potentially related to the way that the president has conducted himself in office. It is a wide-ranging umbrella that these oversight, intelligence, and judiciary committees are investigating. That all moves forward now with the increased threat and potential for subpoenas down the road if the Trump administration continues to do what they have been, which is saying to House Democrats, hey, we believe that we don't have to give you the information that you're demanding from us.
We are certainly at a moment of history. Another Trump tweet has come out. Let's put it up on the screen because I don't have it in front of me. There it is. Pelosi, Nadler, Schiff, and, of course, Maxine Waters. Can you believe this? So he has...
Yeah, and let me just set the scene. He's sitting, Lester, just a few blocks from where we are at Trump Tower. He has returned now from the United Nations General Assembly before more events later. Clearly, the president is watching what is unfolding in this extraordinary day right now.
Yeah, officially on his calendar, it's executive time before he goes to an event here in New York this evening. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.